All right. Well, welcome everybody. Today we have our career mapping workshop that's been organized by our Leader Launchpad community. Joining us as facilitators, we have Stephanie and Heather from Carpenter Smith Consulting. For those of you who weren't able to attend our first Leader Launchpad event, we did have a group collaboration on what kind of topics, strategies, different things that people would like to learn. And at the top of that list ranked career mapping. So we're really excited to bring this forward. We have some fabulous presenters that will be walking us through some great tips and tricks. So feel free to post questions in the chat. I think we'll have an opportunity to engage with a few Q&A options throughout the presentation. And then I'd like to hand things over to our community co-chairs if anybody would like to pop on and say hello or say any words about Leader Launchpad before we get started.
Greg, do you want to go?
Yeah, that's fine, Sammy. I was about to say, hi, Greg Jorgensen. I'm an executive in residence at TAO, and I'm also one of the connection points and advisors, mentors with the Leader Launchpad community. And Samuel is one of our co-directors. I think we're going to have a few others joining us today, Ben Parrish and Kelly Cronin. This community is all about people who are maybe in their second or third position. Oh, there's Kelly right there. Hi, Kelly.
Hey, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good.
They are starting to manage people, or it's anybody that wants to learn about their career and how to map that career, whether that's from a business perspective or from a personal perspective. And I think the co-chairs sort of went out and did a poll, and this was one of the things that Justin said that really felt that the community wanted to learn more about and contribute. So onward and upward, and I'll turn it back to you, Justin.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, so without further ado, we'll turn it over to Heather and Stephanie to get us started.
Great. So I will share my screen now. Let's see. Okay, hopefully everybody can see that. Yes, okay, I got thumbs up from Justin. So thanks for having us. We appreciate it. I'm not sure how many of you have read either of the little bios on us, but I thought I'd just give you a little bit of information on the work that we do, so it'll kind of make sense as we go into this workshop. So we work with individuals on career coaching and executive coaching. We work with small businesses, advising them. We also do team development work and organizational consultation. And the foundation of the work that we like to do at the beginning is to help people think about what is their vision for success. So when that comes to coaching individuals, it's helping them think about all the various facets of their life. What are their priorities? What does the balance look like of things? And then where do they want work to play a role? What would success look like for them in their life if their work played XYZ role? Because it's different for every one of us. So we find that setting that foundation early on can be pretty helpful in further discussions. And then it's also similar with organizations and teams, is setting that foundation first of, let's either look at the vision that we've already said that we had for success and maybe refining it or describing what that vision would look like, and then starting to build from there. So then what do we need? What are the building blocks that we need in this organization to create this vision of success? So that's kind of how we're going to start talking about things today. So first, we're going to cover how we think about career mapping. Then I'm going to go into some more detail on career mapping for individuals, and we'll do a couple of little exercises to give you a taste of how we try to support people in thinking about their career journey. Then Stephanie's going to go into some detail on career mapping for managers and organizations and give you some thoughts and questions and foundations of how to start thinking about this and to create this for your organization. Then we'll go over some key takeaways, and really we wanted to also make sure we leave time at the end for questions that either you have now or may come up throughout the workshop. So hopefully that all makes sense. If you didn't have a chance to grab the workbook link, I'd recommend getting a piece of paper or a notebook and a pen, especially for the exercises that we'll do. And there also may be some questions as Stephanie's talking about some of her foundational work that you might want to jot down. And in case anyone didn't get the workbook, I'll be trying to show the same slides on the screen that you would have on the couple of pages in the workbook. So I think that's it. So without further ado, so for individuals, the way we think about career mapping is also career strategy or mapping your career success or career leadership. And by that, we mean taking ownership of your own career at every stage. And in order to do that, you have to, again, take this step back and think about what is your unique vision of success? How do all the facets of your life play a role? And then you can make more choiceful decisions moving forward toward that vision of success that you have. It's pretty similar for organizations. Again, it's identifying what is your bigger vision of success. Then it's starting to communicate and share that vision and collaborate with the managers and leaders in your organization and start to craft what are the roles and responsibilities needed? What are the pieces needed to help us create this success? And then even more detailed work is at the manager level, is starting to think about if we are going to fulfill the organization's vision of success, what does career progression look like? Who are the people that we have right now who are in the right positions? Who are the people who we have who we think can be rock stars, and we need to develop them and help them see what the career path could look like. And then finally, it's looking to see what are the positions that we still need to fill and what are the skills required for those and how do we hire for that. So as we think about career mapping for individuals, sometimes people will ask us, so why do we have to take this step back and create this bigger vision? And it's pretty simple. And most of you probably know this, but if we don't know where we're going, then how will we know when we get there is one of the sayings. So by creating this clearer vision, you are more apt to be making choiceful decisions that will get you closer to that goal that you've envisioned, to that success that you've envisioned. And you'll also be more likely to feel successful. You know, in the craziness of life every day, we're doing, and oftentimes we don't take a breath to think about, am I making choices that are in alignment with what I've said really matters the most to me? And we care about that. We're pretty passionate about helping people do more of the things that they love to do. So that's why. So one of the exercises I'm going to have you do, let me just check the chat box. I see a couple chats in there. Okay, thanks, Justin. Whoops, let me back up. So one of the first exercises we're going to do really quickly here is helping you think about your strengths. So when you are operating at your best, when you're really nailing it and you're doing things that you love doing, what does that look like? So when we do this work with people, we encourage them to think about not just work, but in your personal life. So it's work or personal. Oftentimes, I think we can self-edit. And if someone asks us, what are you really good at? We do a laundry list of the tasks that we do at work. And oftentimes it can be that our natural best strengths are strengths that we use out in the world every day, whether it's at work or not. So this exercise that we're going to do is called Peak Experiences. And it has you take off the lens of just work. So I'll have you think about personal or work. And again, this is a pretty abbreviated version so that we can make sure we get through this and then Stephanie can have time to talk about her stuff, not her stuff, about career mapping for managers and organizations. Not that mine is better, but we never compete.
Never.
So to help you think about this, if you do have the workbook, turn to page 3. And if you don't have the workbook, I'm going to put it up here on the screen. I'd like you to think about a peak experience that you've had at any time in your life. It could be a satisfying activity or maybe a project that you worked on. It could be a role that you have in your life or had, or maybe a job function that in general you enjoyed the doing of and you felt some sort of accomplishment. You felt proud about it. And it really, again, could be anything. They certainly run the gamut for people. There's no right or wrong answer. And what I'd like for you to do is write a couple notes, either in your notebook or if you just have a piece of paper, about what was that experience, and then write a list of all of the skills that you can think of that you used throughout this experience. Hard and soft skills. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. And I'm going to bring up on the screen some examples that you'll see if you have the notebook, but we find giving people some examples helps them start to think about maybe what their peak experience was. So I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. And if you finish before the timer goes off, I'd love for you to write a little note in the chat box about what your experience was. So, okay, go ahead. Oh, I love that, Kelly. Joining the Launchpad was a peak experience. Nice. Thanks, Dalen. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Mentoring a report to a promotion. That's wonderful. I think mentoring is such a gift. That's great. So we've got a couple minutes left. And again, if you finish writing down all of your skills, we'd love to have you share it in the chat box. Oh, that's another good one. Connecting authentically and deeply over a cup of coffee. Creating organizational processes and procedures. And a piece of pie. Thanks, Justin. Have about a minute left to go. And I'd say even if you finish your list of skills, take a look and see, could you fine tune any of them to be a little more specific? Okay, so now that you have thought about a peak experience, something that you loved doing, and you've written down all of the different skills you've used during that experience, go through and pick out, you can circle or put a star next to them, your top 3 skills. Typically, your top ones will be a marriage of what you love doing and what you do really, really well. So it's that sweet spot. So go through, I'll just give you about a minute to do that, should be pretty quick. And once you've done that, if you want to note those in the chat box, that would be great. We always love it when people share. Creating connection, making others feel safe. That's a great skill. Okay. And again, this is a pretty abbreviated version of the full exercise. And so what I'd recommend, if this was a helpful way for you to start thinking about you at your best, you could do this exercise, but think of 5 to 7 peak experiences in your life. So that starts to give you a breadth of skills, and you'll start to see some themes most likely arise that are common between them. And then the goal would be to narrow that list down to your top 5 to 7. So that gives you a pretty good orb of this is really you at your best. And if you're doing more of this in your life, wow, you'd probably feel pretty great. And then the question becomes, how do I want to use these skills and where do I want to use them? And we'll talk just a little bit about that next. So now that we've thought about what are the skills I love using, what are the skills I'm really good at, what am I at my best, it's really important to take a minute to think about what really matters most to you in your life so that then you can think about where would success fit in, where would career success fit in there in my life. So as we're doing this work with people, we're often recommending they think about all the facets of their life. So what would I want work-life balance to look like? What are my most important relationships that I either want to nurture or that I want to create? Where are my priorities on health and wellness? What are the hobbies that I want to make sure I keep doing? And then, of course, where does work fit into that? So that as you're creating this view of career success, you're really thinking about your whole life. You know, we have a finite amount of time. And so it makes sense to be practical about this. So on page 4 in your workbook, and I'm going to bring that up on the screen here, the question we would ask people as they're keeping all of these things in mind, all of these other facets of their life, is what's the role that you want work to play in your life so that you feel successful? And it may be that it's just at this point in my life. As you'll see in some of the examples, those are people at different points in their life, so they need something different from work. That doesn't mean that maybe at another point they'll change what success means. But for now, some people, like single parent, success at work means I'm getting paid well enough, I have good benefits, but I have time that I can spend with my kids. And again, the more we can be specific about the role we want career to play in our lives and how that will feel successful for us, the more likely we are to have that right balance and to make those choices along the way toward that vision. So what I'd like for you to do now is I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to answer the question, what's the role you want work to play in your life? And I'll go ahead, I'm going to set the timer just for a couple of minutes. And if you just even want to make some notes about it. And then again, if anyone wants to share in the chat box, what's the role you'd like work to play in your life, we'd love to see that. Okay. So along with this kind of bigger picture work that we do, we take these pieces and then we start to say, okay, so if I am here today, meaning these are the skills that I have, this is the experience that I have, you want to make notes of that. And then this is the vision that I have for what role I would like work to play in my life. And you may know the skills that you need or experience that you need, but you may not. But we'd encourage you to ask, look around, look at some job descriptions online, start to get an idea. Again, practically speaking, what would it look like for me to get from where I am today to this vision of success? Do I need other skills? Is there a license that I need, certification? Maybe it's additional education. Do I need a certain amount of experience? There's certainly much more online available now for classes and training for managers and leaders in all sorts of industry, and really inexpensively or even free, I think. There's quite a few places that are offering things. So really good to think about these things. Find as much as you can. And sometimes in order to fill in those gaps, the most important piece is thinking about the connections that you need to foster. So we would call, this is really the most important of our career strategy process, is helping people think about, who can I talk to who might know more about this? Who do I have in my network, or who do I have in my network who could introduce me to someone? And it's thinking about doing a short little informational interview with that person. Maybe they're in a role that you think, this is the type of role that I would want, or maybe it's in an industry that you're really interested in. Get out there and, again, just a short little conversation to ask them, what did their career progression look like? And talk with quite a few people, because then you'll start to see themes. How long did it take people? What did their progression look like? What sort of companies did they work in? And is it a faster career map to get there in a smaller company versus a bigger company? And what are the pros and cons? You're starting to build a more realistic view of what that world does look like, so you can decide, do I actually want to go there? And what would it take for me to get there? And again, the piece about making connections is really, really important. And sometimes we do have people who say, well, I don't have anybody in my network. And I think, talk about it, talk about it, talk about it to everyone who's in your close-knit world. And oftentimes people realize, oh my gosh, I have an aunt or an uncle who actually works in this field over there. Or my friend's dad knows someone who does this type of work. Again, the more you talk about it, also the more excited you can get about it, and the more feedback you can get from different people as well who may have been in those types of industries. So what we love to do as we're, oh, let me just check the chat box first, make sure there's not. Oh, thank you. Some people were posting. Networking and making connections with different communities, developing both tactical and technical skills. Want my work to be supportive of my life, not the other way around. Want to feel like I have something left to give at the end of the day. Yes, I want to earn enough money to support the lifestyle I enjoy. I want to work for an employer whose values I align with and whom I feel proud to be a manager for. That's great. I love that. Thank you for sharing. So typically, when we're doing these webinars or workshops, or at least when I'm attending them, what I find is, no matter how engaged I feel with the content, or I'm thinking, yes, I'm going to do this new thing, I find that as soon as it's over, I'm off onto the next shiny thing, and I completely forget whatever excitement I had for this. So I like to have people write themselves a little commitment on what's the next thing you will do, even if it's just one small step. What's the next small step you will do to own your career progression? And again, it may be, oh yeah, I want to go back through and do 5 to 7 peak experiences, or seeking out a mentor, which is amazing. And I know the Technology Association does some of that, and that's such a great thing. And we were just chatting with Greg about that too. Mentoring and being mentored are such a great learning experience for both parties, I think. So it could be any one of these or any other small step that you think, yes, this is what I want to do. And I want to map it out. And one of our pieces of advice that we would give to people is, you are here, you want to go here. Try to come up with a timeline, even if it's just your best guess right now, and then break it down into the smallest steps possible so that it doesn't feel like you have to jump to the other side of the river without landing on a couple of rocks in between. Not landing on a couple of rocks, I mean, without jumping to a couple of rocks in between. I certainly don't want that to happen. So I am going to give you a minute to kind of think about what your next step would be. And in the meantime, I'll stop sharing my screen so that Stephanie can take over. But I think if there are any specific questions for individual career mapping right now, I know we kind of took you through a couple of abbreviated versions of our process. I guess now might be a good time to chat about any of the individual questions. Does that work for you, Justin? Is that okay if we do it that way? Okay, and so I would say you could feel free to type it in the chat box or certainly raise your hand and ask a question. And if not, then we can let Stephanie take over.
I think I do have one question. Samuel here.
Yes.
Sometimes our vision changes because of the environment you're in. You may have a vision, but then, because you're in a certain environment, and then you change, you go to a different environment, and the vision that you had changed because it's being influenced by all these other external things. Have you seen such kind of a situation? Do you have any guide on how you need to deal with that?
Yes, and I appreciate you bringing that up because that's a key piece that I did not mention. Quite a bit of what we help people think about is what is the right environment for you? And of course, we can't find out everything when we're interviewing, but part of this growing your network can help you start to uncover some background information that maybe wouldn't come up at an interview. And there's some certain questions you can ask to help you start to uncover what does this environment really look like. Often one of the questions that we would recommend people ask when interviewing would be asking the same question to everyone that interviews you is something like, what has kept you here so long? Or what's the number one reason people stay here? It's interesting to ask an open-ended question, but of course, if you ask it of multiple people, if they all say, oh my gosh, it's such a collaborative environment, we really trust each other and we go all in to figure out an answer to a difficult problem. Or it's the donuts every Friday. I don't know. You never know what people are going to answer, but it's an interesting way to start to ask about culture. And we would recommend that at any point you think about, is this the right environment for me? In addition to, am I using the skills that I love? And so part of thinking about the right environment could be starting with a list of I don't likes. So if there's things about your current environment that you don't like, it'd be really good to list those out so that as you're looking for a new job, really be thinking about, these are the other things that I need in place. They're both so important to making sure that you have career success, that it's the right environment for you. So everything from size of company to the type of risk, the type of leadership in the company, whether it's really social or not social, it'll be a different combination for everyone. So we really do encourage thinking about that and writing it down so that, oftentimes we think getting offered the job is the prize versus it has to be right for us too. And so it can be helpful to have we call it your core criteria. These are the skills I'd love to be using, and this is the environment I would love to be in. And you can literally use it as a checklist as you're looking at different places and interviewing at different places. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Okay.
Right. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I did want to add on, when I was going to go back to graduate school, I was thinking about becoming an engineer. And so I talked to several engineers and many of them said to me, I hate engineering, but if I was a woman and I was an engineer, I'd kill myself. And I was like, that's interesting. So I chatted with several people and it was interesting how, this was back east, how really toxic the engineering community was for women at that time. That's a long time ago. I'm old. So, but it was fascinating. And I did steer my career more towards people because I thought that's a big part of what I want to do. But it's amazing how much you can learn about environment just by asking questions. So anyway, it has since changed, I believe. So that's helpful.
It's changed that you want to go back to engineering, or that the engineering
No,
field
it's
has
changed that
changed?
engineering
Okay.
isn't as toxic. I know
It's like,
several women who are engineers.
are you giving your notice?
No.
Are you getting out of this
Yeah,
company?
yeah, totally. So, Heather, is it the right screen? Heather's my tech.
Yes.
Good. All right. So when we talked about this presentation, one of the things that we really had to think about was, does the individual come first, or do organizations and managers come first? Because both matter. And part of our decision was really that even if organizations are made up of leaders and managers, and so they are all individuals as well. And so starting with the individual does make more sense, because even if you have, for instance, I'm working with someone who's inherited a company, it's a family-owned company that's been passed down, and I'm working with them, they own the company. I'm not so sure they wanted to own this company, right? So they're trying to figure out for them, what does their career path look like, given they've got this company that they're sort of expected to run. And I think, yeah, you get to decide on that for you. So really understanding what works for you as an individual, regardless of where you work or how you got the job, still matters. So managers, organizations have to identify the right talent to make things work, which is always going to be the why. So making choiceful decisions about the future for your team is critical in the organization. And what matters about that is the greater likelihood of attracting people who sorry, I can't see the slides, who you can retain talent and keep motivated employees, so that in fact everybody wins. One of the things that's made that harder recently is that job hopping has sort of come into vogue. You know, when I first started doing this work, if someone had fewer than 2 years at an organization, it was seen as suspect. Fast forward to now, pre-pandemic, if someone had 2 or more years on their resume, it was actually seen as somewhat detrimental, which was fascinating. There was this shift, like, well, they must not want to develop. So one of the things that I think really is important about organizations is that you look at developing people, and some of that has been outsourced. I was recently actually working with an organization that honestly is 100 years old, and most people have been there less than 10 years. And so when you think about that, you think, wow, where is that history that's built into the organization that often is carried by individuals who have been there a long time? So it's important, as you think about, how do you retain people who can stay in an organization and help create that continuity that drives not only the culture forward, but also the values forward. So one of the most important things about when you're talking about an organization is very similar to people, which is, what's the vision? Where are you aiming to go? Organizations need to have something that's articulated, in large part because the people within the organization need to see how their efforts are moving the organization toward that vision. That's the place where people find purpose and meaning. And I know some of you mentioned it in the chat box about wanting to be aligned with the organization. And that's where it comes from. That vision starts to embody that for people. And visions don't have to be long and wordy. And in fact, at one time, Pepsi's vision was very simple. I don't know if it was their vision or their mission, but it was beat Coke. And so with that kind of a vision, everybody was able to see how they were contributing to that, from the salespeople to the person, to taking things to the distributors, to the people who are actually bottling or canning the soda, it was easy to see how you belonged. So at a high level then, an organization needs to know what roles or responsibilities are needed to take the organization closer to its vision. Now, this is where you want to work in collaboration with either the CHRO, the Chief Human Resources Officer, or the Director of Human Resources. But these are the people who should be starting to map the roles and skills that are needed to move the organization forward. But it's important that these are broad brushstrokes. You do not, as the leader of the organization, want to get into the weeds about who's doing what. It's really important. And that's where really getting your human resources at the table is really important, because you want to have their input on the who to execute on your vision. So then in terms of organizations, really the most important thing is that if your organization doesn't have a vision, or actually what's worse is if they do have a vision and it's not known, then it's really important to create that shared vision or to share that vision with the leadership team and with the organization. So you want everyone to really have a real strong understanding of what it is that this organization is trying to do. And I think sometimes it is a differentiator for people, right? So having an important vision, it's, you know, if Amazon was to make Jeff Bezos more money, I bet they would have a very different type of person signing up to do that versus like a nonprofit, right? So I think you have to be thoughtful also about what your vision is, because it brings you different types of applicants. So as a manager then, the job of the manager is to to bring that vision to life, to fulfill that vision of the organization by deciding who is needed to make that vision become a reality. And this is where real career mapping takes place. So one of the things you have to do as a manager is to think about, are the members of the team using their greatest strengths, and are they using it to enact the vision of the company? What skills are needed beyond the current situation, and what are skills that are going to be needed next? And I think this is one of the more challenging ones. I think as a manager, it's really easy to get caught in the day-to-day. And I think one of the most important things is that you come up to get a 3,000-foot level view and then go back down. So it would be optimal if you laid out a career progression for the role. So for instance, and this is for the role, not for the person, which I think is also really important. So you say, okay, in this department, we're going to have, you know, person X or role X can move to role Y in approximately 2 years. Role Y can move to role Z in approximately, say, 3 years. Z to double A in another 4, and so on, up to and including taking over your job, right? Because this way, then you're creating a succession plan that also works for the organization, and you're also growing people. So instead of people having to leave the company to feel like they're getting more skills or to advance, what you're doing is telling them right at the start, this role over this amount of time should become this other role, which then gives those people a chance to think about if that's the arc of their career that they're interested in. So then hopefully the individual's arc and then the corporate arc come together, and they work together to help people move into the future that is desirable for both, really, so that everybody wins. I think that the other thing that's really important to remember is that in flat organizations, this is a whole lot harder, right? So sometimes if an organization just like, we don't have that many layers, it's really going to be important to still identify what's possible, but they may need to stay in the role longer, and you may need to be creative about giving them other opportunities to gain skills that they may not have the opportunity to do from within the organization. So essentially, it's still building out a succession plan, because ultimately you should be teaching and training everyone to take your job, with the belief that as the manager, you're getting people to come up to that place that you may have to, like for instance, with even with Tao, say, look, here's a way for you to go get mentoring from someone who's been on a much more technical side, even though that's not what we're able to do. And I think what's also important here is that, well, let me go to the next slide. So if your team is here, you have the future state of how you want the team to be working. It really is your goal to create alignment behind the vision, work with your team to determine purpose, mastery, and autonomy. And the reason we talk about this is because Daniel Pink talks a lot about these three concepts in his book, Drive. But he doesn't put them in this order. And we have found that the order also matters. So then, that in order for someone to be successful, they must be aligned with the vision before they can master the skills that are needed to do the job effectively. And before they can have autonomy, they have to prove to you that they've mastered the skills. So first, it's getting aligned behind the vision, showing mastery, and then give them autonomy to do the work. One of the ways in which I think we have failed people as managers is that we are so worried in the Pacific Northwest about not micromanaging that people don't manage at all. And that doesn't develop people. You need to be able to develop people, and you need to see that you need to help them build the skills that they need to succeed. And you cannot be more concerned about their career than they are. And I think this is really one of the trickier ones. Sometimes helping someone leave is the best move that you can make for your team, because what you tolerate is, in fact, what you teach. So I think that that's a problem that I think more people in the Pacific Northwest have than I have seen before, right? So you have to really be thinking about who you can develop and who, honestly, you think, you know what, where they want to go and where this role is going to go, they're never going to align. Help them leave so they can find their place that aligns. I was working with an executive recently who they hired an admin, and within the first month, this admin was complaining that she hadn't been promoted. So this executive was like pissed. And so we were talking, and I said, so what is she doing to advance herself? And he said, well, nothing. She's walking around having meetings with people. She is wasting people's time. And I think she was looking for a mentor. You know, again, I give her some credit for reaching out, but coming into the organization and saying, you know, what are you going to do for me? Here I am. That's not the kind of person you necessarily want to develop. You want someone to come into the organization to say, hey, I'm here. I want to help you succeed. In helping you succeed, I also want to succeed myself, right? It's that coming together to make it happen. And I think it's really important to remember, this is never done. This is an ongoing process. You are going to be developing people over and over, right? And again, if the intent is that they take your job, hopefully it's because on your career map, you are moving up as well, right? And so it should be a case where you are constantly building out succession planning based on building skills of people who work with you or for you. So a tool that I think is really helpful for managers is this little matrix, and we adapted it from situational leadership. But situational leadership got a little complicated, so we kind of we simplified it. We are known for simplifying complex types of oh gosh, I just lost the word. Theories and ideas, and turning into something that's a little more easy to digest. So if you look on this thing, on this matrix, on one side is competency, level of competency. On the other side is level of commitment. So if you've got someone in the lower corner, this person has low competence and low commitment. And you are likely going to be spending most of your time coaching, directing, and supporting these employees. They need a lot of your time. And this is a person who, if they don't improve, you may really need to help them leave. They're not in the right place for them. Now, if you have someone who is very committed to the organization, but they're not terribly competent yet, you're going to need to spend time directing them. That means giving them clear ideas about what to do and what to accomplish, so that, or even to say to them, I need you to go figure out 3 options for this and bring it back to me, and then I'll tell you which one to do, right? They are not fully able to do the job, but they really believe in the job. And so this is someone you can really develop. If someone is highly competent, but they're not terribly committed, then for them, this really is about support. And what you're wanting to do is to get them to buy into the organization or the team, right? So for some reason, these folks may or may not be connected to the values, right? So if someone is like, I don't get it. I can do the job. I'm not sure I want to do the job. They're not aligned with the purpose. I think support them in understanding that, or again, it may not be a good fit. It's easier to bring someone who is a high commitment and low competency level up than it is to bring someone who has a low commitment level, but they're highly competent, to bring them over. Because the ideal spot is this final square, which is delegation. And for these folks, you want to spend most of your time giving them the freedom to do the job that they need to do. And you're available to them when they need you, but this is not the employee that you have to stand over their shoulder. This is the one who, this employee should have the greatest autonomy to get things done, because they've proven to you. They not only have they understand the purpose, they also have mastered, they have shown you competency, and here you can give them that autonomy. So next steps. So then if you own the company, if you are leadership in an organization, I think really making sure that the vision is articulated, helping to identify the right people, that they're in the right roles, that they're using their skills in the right way. Collaborate with the employees. And I find this one a little challenging, because you are not, as a manager, you are not there to be their career coach. You can tell them what's possible for the role, but I think it's really important that you don't change the role based on the individual, because that's how organizations get into trouble. A lot of times when people are working on their org charts and stuff, thinking about who they need and what has to happen, they put people in instead of roles in. You have to put in roles and then think about what's possible for that role, and then you plug the people in. But if you organize around a single person, that really leaves the organization vulnerable. So yes, you collaborate with them to say, hey, what does your arc look like? And then we'll tell you what ours look like, and let's see how they fit. You don't want to go to them and say, hey, what do you want to do? We'll make it happen, because you cannot promise them that. And actually, I think it'll probably get you in trouble, because then they'll be highly disappointed. And again, work with your HR, whether that's a CHRO or just a director of HR, I guess what would be the lowest thing, a junior HR person, like they have ideas and thoughts about what role, who it takes to do the roles that you have identified that are important for the organization. And then takeaway, remember, this is a fluid process. It's not a one and done. And you do want to be working with others and communicating often about what the needs of the organization are, how they may be changing over time, and how you can get the right people doing the right roles for the right amount of time and for the good of the organization. And there's a Yogi Berra quote, which I think is great, which is, if you don't know where you're going, you might wind up someplace else. And that's as true for organizations as it is for individuals. So unlike Heather, this was not an engaged thing, interactive, but certainly if you have questions, thoughts, we'd love to hear them. And I will stop sharing, and so we can come back and we can answer any questions you may have.
I had one general question, so apologies for being late. Great content. I was actually having a conversation about this before I came on, so it was completely appropriate.
Very good. Teed up.
Yeah, it was perfect. So I really love the concept of aligning behind the vision, developing mastery, and then providing autonomy. But as a manager, I want to hire people who are much more intelligent than me to come do a role, like especially on the team. How do you tangibly track if somebody has mastery if they're smarter than you in a situation? Like, are you setting KPIs and trying to like see if they're completing the job, or any other tools that you could recommend?
I think it's mostly the KPIs. I think that if they are, you do want them smarter than you, and you want them to be able to share with you what they're accomplishing, because if they can't tell you, they can't tell other people, right? And I think sometimes people who are really intelligent can get caught in what they know versus relating that with others. And I think it's going to be really important that they share with others their success, and I think having metrics that show that success in a way that you understand is also going to be important for others, and for themselves too. So yeah, I think it's great. You always want to hire people who know more than you, and I think you should be able to measure their results, but you also need them to be able to share with you in words that you understand, because if they start talking too technical, they're going to lose a lot more people than just you.
Yeah, thank you much, Stephanie.
Thanks for the question. Any other thoughts or questions?
I have a question going back to the idea of organizations that are a little more flat, especially with a lot of tech companies, I've noticed, especially if they're going on a technical track that isn't necessarily aligning with managing others, but managing projects and things like that. How it's at least occurred to me that organizations that are a bit more flat, when they're trying to develop these ladders and these progression steps, they'll oftentimes kind of lean on the individuals that are in positions or people that are trying to achieve those positions to create and idealize what that process is. So how involved do you think other associates or employees or report to how involved do you think they should be, and what the development of that process looks like, if at all? Or is that just really a double-edged sword and not worth getting into?
So say a little more. So you've got a flat organization. You've got someone who clearly the organization wants to keep, but there's no direct path at this point.
Yes. So they start to involve that individual in developing the process.
Yeah, that's tricky, because it starts to become it almost starts to become a contract, right? That you're working with this person, which you can't really do. You can't say, hey, build this out. And yet, if we go back to Ben's question, right, if somebody's got an idea about something, you're like, shit, I never thought of that, excuse me, then I think you do want their help. I think what's tough about flat organizations is sometimes you do have to rely on people in the role to say, to look out and say, this is what this could be, right? And this is how it could happen. If they can help you articulate that, working with either the owner of the company, given it's a fairly small company, or whoever HR person it is, I think you can build in concepts if you talk about it as roles versus about them, right? So you know, how do you see this role evolving versus how do you see yourself evolving? Because it may or may not be something they want. I think one of the problems with the fact that I think organizations really did people a disservice when they stopped mentoring in-house. A lot of that got outsourced, which is why executive coaches exist. Honestly, I wouldn't have a job if they hadn't outsourced as much as they did. So I appreciate it on one hand. But on the other hand, I think what they did was teach people that to get what they need to get, they have to leave. And I think part of what the trick now is to say, yes, continue to build your skill set and let's bring it back in the organization and take you through a role that you may or may not have thought you maybe could do. And we'll support you to do that, even if it means going out and getting coaching about something that we can't teach. But unfortunately, what used to happen was they just were putting bodies in roles because they had tenure. It's like, well, they've been there 30 years. We might as well put them up. It's like, oh, good Lord. That's so demotivating for people under them, right? It's like, yeah, you don't just get to put a body in a role. What you have to do is say, this is the role, who can fulfill it. So it is tricky, Justin. I think engaging someone to help is important, and it's also important to talk about the role versus them. And you know, some people can do it. I think some people won't be able to. I think some people will be like, why should I have to do my own job? And again, I would take it back to, hey, in the arc, what would you see for yourself? What would you see as possible? And they say, oh, what are the roles we might be able to do? So I think that's.
Yeah, and I'd like to add on to that too. I think Justin and I think Charmaine also made a comment too, is especially in smaller companies that can be more difficult. And I think it's different. It's different to bring people together to have a conversation versus making a promise to say, let's collaborate, but be really clear up front that we're collaborating. We want to get the best of ideas here. Then we're going to go back as a leadership team and figure out what makes the most sense. And then we'll come back and let you know what we're doing, where we're headed. But I think there's a big difference between collaborating and having this conversation again versus making the promise that this will be exactly what you want, which is hard to promise when you don't know what it is that each employee might be thinking.
And in startups, you often don't know, there's not a direct order when you need certain things, right? So sometimes all of a sudden you're like, wow, we need this role. It didn't even occur to us back when we were setting things up that this role would be so important. And some of that's because you're going to start to see gaps. Like, all right, let's fill the gap. What do we need? Who do we need? What are the skills? When I say who, it's what are the skills? And then you look for them. So.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's, you know,
I have a quick one too. That's really enlightening. I have a quick one too. What about when you have more than one individual who have high commitment and high competence in the same team? You're the leader. How are you going to balance the attention? Probably the only thing will be different is their personality. But when it comes to deliverance, they're delivering probably all the same. How do you balance the attention and how do you help them to go into their different direction without creating, that kind of unhealthy competition?
I think that if someone is highly committed, I think probably, and then highly competent, it's funny. I think helping someone feel attached to the organization takes a different amount of skill and energy. It's actually probably a little bit more almost social than helping someone who is highly committed, but they're for whatever reason that you're not seeing the competence that you would need to see. I suspect, again, if you had very limited time, I think your time is better spent with the person who is very committed to the organization, because probably the competence they need they can learn, whereas helping someone learn to appreciate what the company is doing or what they offer, I think is a little harder. You know, ideally, they both move enough on their own and are inspired enough on their own to start to move to the place where they can just work autonomously and just have things delegated to them so that they can feel successful in what they're doing. That doesn't always go that way. You know, it's sort of whenever I'm working with an executive, and if they have emotional intelligence, I'm much less worried about them, because teaching those kinds of things are a lot harder than teaching some of the practical skills that I think come with needing to be a leader. And again, I think sometimes relating to purpose and value is more about, it's almost a little more emotional than it is anything else. So I don't know if that.
Yep, that helps.
Okay, thank you.
I have another comment or question.
Uh-huh.
And this might be a slightly off topic of what the overall, but it was something mentioned in the presentation earlier, this idea of a more hands-off management approach in the Pacific Northwest, which I have personally noticed. I'm from Texas originally. There's not a whole lot of hands-off management.
Right.
Well, and I was in hospitality, so like there was a right way and a wrong way to do everything. So I'm curious, like how would an individual who is looking for those next steps and that progression and that mentor and leadership that they want from an individual, how do you approach your boss and say, I need more leadership from you? Or how do you approach somebody without it sounding like, I don't know how to do my job, or I don't, you know, you're trying to walk that balance. How would you recommend approaching a superior and saying, you know, I need a little more leadership. I'm looking to get something out of this.
I think one of the best ways to do that is to talk about it in terms of stretching. So I think if you say to your boss, you know, if you're being relatively successful but no one's telling you anything, whether you are or not, saying to them, look, it's really important to me to stretch and grow in this role. And what I would love to do is create some stretch goals and really, like Ben had said, find some KPIs. Like what are those key performance indicators that you need to hit, and then ask them for feedback. And one of the things I encourage everyone to do is to tell the person they're going to be working for or with how they best receive feedback, right? Because a lot of people are really afraid to give feedback. Fascinating. The minute it's a little bit scary, they go, hey, have a good day. Like, what do you mean? You were going to go read them the riot act. Like, no, hi, have a good, have a great weekend. So I think for you to say, my hope is that I am doing this job very, very well. And that my hope is that by working with you, I will do things even better. And I would love it if you would tell me when you think something is, it's a B+, good enough. Like, I want A's. So, I won't be offended if you say to me, hey, why don't you try this instead? Or why don't you go, add this to that? So put yourself out as someone who wants to learn from them, which I think is really, and what I think is hard is I think people continue to do more with less. And I think one of the last things they can do is if they've got a competent employee, they just keep handing things to that person, and they're doing other things. And so you may have to be almost a little bit noisy to say, hey, I need some stretch goals here. I'm interested in really tackling new new areas that, you know, I don't know it 100%, but I'm willing to give it a try. Like, I think you may have to push for that and say it, and I'd love to learn from you as I do it. Because it's good for people's ego to, if they think you want to learn from them, right? It's like,
Yeah.
hey, you have things to offer, right? Give it to me while I'm here. So,
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that too, Steph. I think that comes back to your to the individual career map. It's knowing what your needs are. What's the right condition for you? So if you don't let your boss know, then they won't know. And so it makes sense to first know what you want, let people know what you need, and maybe it is not the right place for you. And so thinking about that. So if your boss comes back and just can't do it, or maybe you have a discussion about where you could learn from, and can they get behind you wanting to stretch and grow? So I think it really is important to make sure as an individual to understand what are the right working conditions and the right environment where you are most likely to thrive. Yeah.
Yep. And I have to share a story. I'm sorry, I'm a storyteller. I was working with a guy once, and he had an employee who really was not succeeding. And I said, so what have you done so far? And he said, well, I don't say good morning. I said, pardon me? He said, I don't say good morning. I was like, well, help me understand. He said, oh, that way he knows I'm mad. I said, oh.
That wouldn't work with my partner. Like, you've just been real quiet today.
I was blown away that was his management style. He just stopped talking to people if he was mad. He wouldn't give them feedback about what they were not doing successfully in the role. I think, wow, talk about avoidant, not good. We worked together a long time, needless to say.
Charmaine did post.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just seeing it too.
Oh, Charmaine did post a question. If there are any recommendations on how to inspire alignment with the company vision for the support category.
So can you tell me a little bit about the support category? What does that mean? Like customer support, or Charmaine, can you?
Yeah, just from the diagram that was shared. How you have the box for people who are categorized as support, so to speak.
Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. Yep. So in terms of that, I think one thing that often happens is people aren't aware of what the vision even is, or if they are, and they're like, yeah, but what does that have to do with me, is typically what people say. So I think it would be really important to this person. So let me tell you, let's talk a little bit about why your role is important to this. So again, I love the Beat Coke vision because I think everybody can relate to that. So say if for this person, like they're really competent, but maybe they don't really care about beating Coke. You say, so let's talk about how what you're doing in your role that is helping us to beat Coke, and how are we going to celebrate when that happens, right? So I think I would try to make it personal for them so that they find themselves believing that they are in fact impacting the organization with the work that they do, because that's usually the disconnect. It's like, well, you know, one of the lines that I hate the most is when people say, don't ask me, I just work here. Like that, like my blood curls when I hear that, because if they are making themselves a victim, right? And I think some of that is for someone who isn't aligned with the vision. I think that's part of what's happening to them. They run the risk of saying, well, don't ask me, I just work here, right? It's like they're competent in what they're able to do, but boy, they don't get it. Because if you can say that, you don't get it. So I would work with them to see, like, kind of back to the vision, like what do they care about, you know? And if honestly, if they are, if they're the kind of person who really believes in technology and they're working for a, oh, trying to think what it would be, like a garden shop. They're probably never going to be aligned, right? It's like, oh, I don't care about plant. There's nothing technological about this plant. So maybe they're not a great fit. But what you want to look for is what's that personal hook for them. And it's like, oh, you know what? We're looking for a way to automate the sprinklers. Like they may get so excited, you have them for life. So does that help at all? Does that make sense?
And I would add to that too a little bit, Stephanie, that it goes back actually to the interview process and to how you talk about the company and the vision and the purpose. Because we know, especially now during COVID, we have so many more people coming in for career coaching because they want to feel an affinity to the purpose of the company where they're working. They really want to do something that aligns with what's in their heart. And so we're seeing more and more companies now. That's a big part of their statement, and even before the job description. And it makes sense because if you can, again, catch people, if they feel aligned, if they're passionate about what you're passionate about as a company, I mean, it's almost a home run there. Like Stephanie said, you can teach people some skills. I mean, obviously they have to have some of the basic education and skills that you need, but to get someone who's going to be really motivated to come in and just wants to do the good work because they believe in what you're doing or building or selling, it's the best. And so really making sure not to overlook that in the interview process.
Yep. Absolutely.
Something I haven't, as we were talking about this, that I was reflecting on, I don't think I have seen that quite that often. It's in the job description or in your employee onboarding, writing out specifically how your job, how your role in the organization contributes to the company's vision. I don't know why that wouldn't be the norm or the standard, like writing the job description to say this is how this role impacts what our company is trying to do. And your onboarding, here's your onboarding packet, here's a description of what you're doing, here's how it impacts day to day. I think that would also help bridge a lot of that gap, and then continuing that further in the ladder as you go up, into what your career map looks like, continuing that cadence of this is how this role that you're aspiring to step into aligns with what the company and organization vision is, would be particularly compelling to me, and also help bridge that gap. If not, it'd be hard to say I don't know how or what the company vision is if I understand my role and how it contributes to it.
How it plays into it. Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's interesting how much we forget to tell new employees, and how much we, in part, I think a lot of times people are so desperate to have another person in, or someone in the role, that they forget to tee them up for success. This is why this is important. This is why, this is how we hope you will stretch, and this is what's possible in this role. And really, a lot of times people leave because people just think nobody cares. People have to feel like they matter. If they don't believe that they matter, they're not going to stick around. So, and what's interesting is it doesn't take that much. I think right now they're starting to say, whoa, I matter. And so if you don't see that I matter, then I'm going to take it into my own hands and find a place where I'm valued and appreciated for what I bring. So, all right.
I've got one other question that kind of goes back to the first section as well. So I have been a huge advocate of informational interviews since I was in college. I'll go and help with mock interviews for college kids now, and talk to some high schoolers on occasion. And I just try and instill the fact that the informational interview is one of the most powerful tools you will ever have. I'm kind of curious, have y'all come across any good strategies or messaging or just ideas of how to effectively get in front of some rock star you might want to be in 30 years, like either for a college kid or for somebody who's in mid-career now? Is it typically LinkedIn, or do you have any other ideas? How's that go?
$1 million question. It is, I think Heather was talking a lot. It really is about who do you know? You know, the Kevin Bacon game, you know, 6 degrees of separation. It's kind of amazing how it works in our own lives. And I think one of the biggest things that's important in getting that, like you may know somebody, or you could even reach out directly on LinkedIn, is really saying that you're not asking for a job. A lot of people make the mistake of going in and sort of hinting that they want a job. And what people hate is to be rejecting of people, right? So part of it is to really say, hey, up front, I'm not looking for a job. What I really want is just to be able to understand your arc or your experience or whatever. But it's so critical. So you don't bring a resume, like tell them not to in any way give the appearance of wanting a job, because if you ask someone to talk about themselves, people will tend to share with you a lot. If you say, you know, I'd like to hear your story, that's really different than I need an informational interview. It's like, I'm just curious about your story and how you got to where you got. Right. I think it's a softer sell for something that I think a lot of people, I think it was in the 90s, were using informational interviews inappropriately because they would really go in and then spring on, so do you have a job for me? And then people would be like, you know, they hate, people hate to reject people. They just do. So you set it up so they don't have to. But I don't know, Heather, do you have other thoughts about how to get on someone's dance card who's...
Well, I mean, sadly, there's no magic bullet there, but it's really committing to doing the work, to making the first couple of connections and then seeing where that can take you. And oftentimes we recommend people write down who are all of the people that you know in your life, who are neighbors, people that you went to school with. LinkedIn does make it easy, and other social media. I think LinkedIn's pretty cool because it'll show you connections. And do a little bit of research on some of the people that you're interested, I mean, not stalking them, but you know, what's the company they're at, and learn a little bit about the company. And so really, I am amazed at the people that I've worked with doing career coaching who have found a job that they wanted and never believed they would get. They didn't believe this nugget was out there. It's because they have just met people in the community, done their networking, and you know more people, then you're also better at interviewing because you're more used to talking about what you love doing and where you really shine. And so it is really, I think, really the word I would use is commitment, just being committed to starting it. And as Stephanie said, don't ask for a job when you're in the interview.
Yeah, that ties into a nugget and fundraising. It's if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. Like when you go to fundraise.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yep. Uh-huh. Right.
Any other questions for Stephanie and Heather? All right. Well, then I'm gonna give everybody like 5 minutes back. I did want to let everybody know we do already have our next Leader Launchpad event scheduled. It's going to be on September 22nd with Alice Tang. She'll be doing a presentation on how to build your future through your network, which is what we were just kind of talking about. So that'll be exciting for everybody to participate in. We do encourage you to go ahead and sign up. I lost my chat box. I'm sorry. I was going to send y'all a link. Here it is. There's a link in the chat. Also, if you have a quick minute to complete the poll that's in front of you to just let us know of what you thought of today's presentation, you'll also get a more in-depth feedback survey, so you're welcome to also complete that one. Your feedback helps us know what we're doing right, what we're doing well, what we can improve on, and how else we can better serve the community. In addition to that, if you have any questions about TAO membership and you're not already a TAO member, please feel free to reach out to myself or any of our co-chairs. You can also complete the form that I just added into the chat as well. Terrific. Well, everybody, again, I'll follow up with a follow-up email that'll have some additional links, how to join the community. It'll also show you where you can go and check out today's recording with additional resources, with the resource book that Heather had earlier and our presentation. Thank you very much, Heather and Stephanie. It was a pleasure having you as usual, and we look forward to seeing everyone else soon.
Thank you.